There is an archive sitting in a military museum in Dresden, Germany. Over 1,000 items, photographs, drawings, letters, death sentences, and farewell letters written the night before an execution to a family that was already scattered across concentration camps and prisons. And these documents belong to one family, a family of 13 people who lived in a small town in North Rhine-Westphalia, a family whose home was raided by the Gestapo nearly 20 times, whose father was sentenced to prison, whose mother was sent to Ravensbrück concentration camp, whose three youngest children were forcibly removed from their home by police and placed in Nazi re-education facilities, whose eldest son was shot by a firing squad, whose second son was beheaded by guillotine, and who, through all of it, refused to renounce their faith. The Casero family were Jehovah's Witnesses, and what happened to them under the Nazi regime is one of the most documented and devastating stories of religious persecution in the 20th century Europe. The eldest daughter, Anna Marie, spent her entire life collecting and preserving those thousands of documents. Every letter, every photograph, every official death notice. She kept them until she died in 2005. And she left them in her will to the Watchtower organization. But they never got them because after Anna Marie died, a brother sold the archive to a German military museum. And now Germany's highest civil court is being asked to decide who the archive rightfully belongs to. That case was heard on March 13th. Let's get into it. To understand why this archive matters, you have to understand who the Casero family was. And I want to spend a little bit of time on this. Franz and Hilda Casero had 11 children. They lived in Bad Liefspringer, a small town in Westphalia. The family was active in their region, distributing religious literature and teaching Bible study classes in their home. The house was conveniently situated for fellow witnesses along a tram route. And in the years before the Nazis came to power, the Casero home was a hub of Jehovah's Witness activity in the region. And when Hitler came to power in 1933, everything changed. The Nazi regime targeted Jehovah's Witnesses because they refused, out of religious conviction, to swear loyalty to a worldly government or to serve in its armed forces. They would not give Hitler the salute. They would not send their children to Hitler Youth. They would not serve in the military. For the Nazis, that refusal was not a private matter of conscience. It was a political threat, and they treated it as one. The Gestapo searched the Caseros' home nearly 20 times looking for banned publications, but the family successfully hid those behind false walls. Authorities repeatedly arrested Anna Marie's parents beginning in the mid-1930s. Their father, Franz, was sentenced to prison, and their mother, Hilda, was eventually sent to Ravensbrück concentration camp. And three of the youngest children, Elizabeth, Hans, Werner, and Paul Gerhard, were forcibly removed from school on March the 7th, 1939, and kept separate from their family, which was accused of spiritual and moral neglect until their liberation in April 1945. So the Nazi state accused Franz and Hilda Casero of spiritual and moral neglect because they were raising their children as Jehovah's Witnesses. And on that basis, police came to their home and took the three children away. Those children would not see their family again for 6 years. And then there are Wilhelm and Wolfgang. Now, Wilhelm was 25 years old when he was shot by a firing squad in Munster, Germany in April 1940. Wolfgang was barely 20 years old when he was beheaded in March 1942. Both executed for the same reason. They refused to serve in the German military. On the night before his execution, Wolfgang wrote to his family, assuring them of his devotion to God. And that letter is in the archive. Their brother, Karl Heinz, survived the war but died in 1946 from tuberculosis that he had developed during his years imprisoned in Dachau concentration camp. He was 28 years old. 3 sons, One shot, one beheaded, one dead of tuberculosis, and the rest of the family scattered across prisons and concentration camps, hiding literature behind false walls, keeping the faith alive in the most dangerous possible circumstances. That is who the Caseros were. Now, let me tell you about Anna Marie specifically, because she is the person at the center of this legal dispute. Anna Marie was the eldest daughter of the Casero family, and from the Nazi takeover until her own arrest in October 1944, the young woman recorded the persecution of the family in pictures, in letters, and other documents. She was, in effect, the family archivist. While the Gestapo raided the house, while her brothers were arrested and executed, while her mother was sent to Ravensbrück, Anna Marie was documenting everything, collecting, preserving, organizing over 1,000 items that told the story of what her family endured. Anna Marie kept all of it for her entire adult life. And when she died in 2005 at the age of 90, she had already made clear what she wanted done with it. The witnesses have documentation to prove that Anna Marie Casero bequeathed the archive that she meticulously compiled to the Jehovah's Witness legal entity in Germany. She wanted the archive to go to the organization. She wanted it displayed in a museum where visitors could come and learn what her family went through. And then she died. And a brother who was no longer affiliated with the Jehovah's Witnesses and has since also died, sold the archive to the Bundeswehr Military History Museum in Dresden. How the archive ended up with her brother after the death of the 90-year-old Casero is unclear, but it did. And the museum bought it. And the Watchtower organization has spent years trying to get it back. So now we arrive at the courthouse, and the legal question being examined by Germany's Federal Court of Justice, the BGH, the highest civil court in the country, is fascinating from a legal standpoint. You see, the core question is this: did the Federal Republic acquire the Casero archive in good faith? In German civil law, there is a principle that allows someone who purchases an object to become its legal owner, even if the person who sold it didn't actually own it, provided they bought it without knowing and without any reasonable way of knowing that the seller had no right to sell. This is the doctrine of good faith acquisition. It protects buyers who act honestly in commercial transactions. The prerequisite for this purchase in good faith is that the buyer did not know or could not have known that the item did not belong to the seller. Now, there's a second complication. German law, or German civil law, also says that good faith acquisition cannot apply to items that were stolen, lost, or otherwise gone missing. The BGH is being asked to clarify when a lost item is no longer considered as such. At what point does an item that left its rightful owner's possession without authorization become legitimately tradable? The lower court, the Cologne Higher Regional Court, had already ruled in favor of the museum, finding that the Jehovah's Witnesses had effectively tolerated Anna Marie's brother as the owner of the archive and thus legitimized his right to sell it. The plaintiff's side, the Jehovah's Witnesses, believe that subsequent legitimization of this kind is not possible. In other words, they argue you cannot retroactively create a right to sell something by tolerating someone's possession of it. The Jehovah's Witness spokesperson Sebastian Stock said, "What is certain is that the archive was unlawfully sold to the museum." He also made a pointed observation about the museum's use of the collection, noting that only 6 of more than 1,000 items are on display, which shows that most of the documents are of no interest to the museum. Now, that last point is worth sitting with, because a military museum in Dresden holds over 1,000 documents belonging to a family persecuted by the Nazi regime. It displays only 6 of them. The rest sit in storage. Now, while the family's chosen institution, the Watchtower organization, has built a museum specifically to house and display this kind of material, where it would be seen by tens of thousands of visitors. The legal question of ownership and the moral question of stewardship are not the same question here, but they are both being asked in this courtroom. Now, I want to pause here because I want to acknowledge that this case is more complicated than most of what we cover. The Casero family story is a story of genuine, heroic resistance to one of history's most evil regimes. Wilhelm and Wolfgang Casero died rather than pick up a weapon for Hitler. Their mother went to Ravensbrück. Their youngest siblings were taken by police. And through all of it, this family kept their faith and documented their persecution with extraordinary care. At the same time, the organization claiming ownership of that story, the Watchtower, is the same organization whose blood doctrine delayed a 14-year-old boy's liver transplant in Africa recently. The same organization that shuns people who leave and then covers up CSA. But the Watchtower has always been very good at harvesting the heroism of its members for institutional purposes. The governing body wants legal right and possession of the Casero collection, not for educational purposes, but for purposes of high control, emotional manipulation to groom their followers for future self-sacrifice. The Casero archive, if the organization wins this case, will be displayed in a Watchtower museum, in a Watchtower framing, as a Watchtower story. Visitors will learn about a family who refused to abandon their faith even under Nazi persecution. And the message will be, this is what faithfulness to Jehovah looks like. This is what the organization is worth dying for. And the Watchtower's museums, like the Watchtower's publications, are not designed to tell the whole story. Those people deserve to be remembered fully, accurately, and in a context that honors the complexity of who they were, not just as martyrs for the organization's narrative, but as human beings. And there's one more dimension to the story that I think deserves to be named. The case was heard on the 13th of March, 2026, and later this year, a new memorial in Berlin will commemorate the persecution of Jehovah's Witnesses under the Nazi regime. And Germany is actively and publicly reckoning with this chapter of its history. That is significant. And the Casero archive, whoever ends up holding it, is one of the most important primary source collections documenting that persecution. Over 1,000 items. Pre-execution farewell letters, death sentences, Gestapo reports, that handwritten record of the family that refused to break. And that record belongs in a place where people can see it, study it, and understand it. Whether that place is the German Military Museum or the Watchtower facility is what the BGH is now deciding. What is not in dispute, and what I want to make sure is clear, is what the Casero family actually endured. Because whatever you think of the organization they belong to, Wilhelm Casero was 25 years old when a firing squad executed him for refusing to fight for Adolf Hitler. And Wolfgang Casero was 20 years old when a guillotine came down for the same reason. Those are people, and their story should be told. A ruling may or may not have been issued yet. What the court decides will tell us something about how Germany values that kind of testimony. So please like and subscribe and share so that we can reach more people. Until next time.